This is Chris Kieritz. He is an arena man for Wizards of the Coast, and I want to make clear before we go any further, a human being person for which I have quite a bit of sympathy, actually. Now, you know when a talented extemporaneous speaker really gets in the groove like the needle on a record player? They ain't sputtering, they're buttering. They got the gift of gab. They're flowing and throwing rhetorical darts and hitting bullseyes every time. Whatever the exact opposite of that is, that's what Chris has going on in this video. And again, I kind of feel bad for him in that way because he knows that he's serving us a turd and he has to call it a delicious pasta dish. So again, in summation, bottom line, no matter what happens in this video, no hatred directed towards this man who is, again, a person. Now to Couch Dev. Hello again, everybody. It is your friend, Dev, another person from a Magic the Gathering YouTube channel to address what happened earlier this week. I'm sorry it took me so long. I'm not like the other YouTubers. Who had a really quick turnaround on this. Kudos to you guys. But you guys know that I like to take a day or two, sleep on it, at least 24 hours, think things over to be as objective as possible, give an even-keeled, well-thought-out take on the issues at hand. And this time I'm probably still going to get a little animated occasionally. Now there are certain to be times in this video, I imagine, where I respond to some things said by a Wizards employee with a little too much bass in my voice. It's probably going to happen. And there's going to be times where maybe I engage in a little speculation as a treat. Maybe speculate on the true intentions of a speaker, what they really mean occasionally. There may even be times where I engage in some animated hyperbole in my reactions for entertainment value. I'm a YouTuber. I could see that happening. But anytime any of those things happen, I'm going to put this picture of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on screen doing the eyebrow thing. Kind of looking back at me like, Dev, you sure about this? Because here's the thing. I, again, find it very important to be as objective and even-keeled as possible in my responses to stuff like this. But even after having seen this thing 4 times, I still find my blood pressure rising a little bit at certain parts of it. We're almost done with the couch bit, believe it or not, because we're going to do things a little differently this time, if you don't mind. Originally, I wanted to do a video essay. That made the most sense, you know, some slick title cards, some nice chapter names, maybe have some music playing up under the track of me on Audacity. That'd be nice, you know, just have a normal one do a video essay. But after having seen this thing so many times, I've decided, I think, right before I hit record, I still hadn't decided how I really wanted to do this video, but I think the best way to do it would be to go through it point by point as it happens and pause and like talk about the things that are being said. I will, just so you know, for the sake of brevity, I'll be cutting some things from the stream out, right? Things that they get repetitively asked and answer multiple times, or just boring bits, to be quite frank with you. Just the boring bits, we'll cut it out. So we're going to try to make this as succinct as possible. But I still want to address all of the points that I can rather than just like, here are the top 5 points. I'm a YouTuber. No, I guess I'd rather be a React streamer for this one video, although I vow and promise you not to go through a React streamer arc anytime soon. But I think this is probably the best way to do it for this one video, and it's going to be as comprehensive as we can make it and kind of, again, go through every point as it's being made, or at least, again, the very, very important ones. The last thing I'll say here is that in the last few days, since the stream originally happened, since I've watched it so many times, I still make it sound like it makes my blood boil and it gets me irritated and stuff, but I have gained some perspective on why they might be doing some of the things and maybe the benefits of some of those things, but I'm not going to go easy on them. Let me put it that way, but let's get to it. React streamer arc starts now. All right, so introductions are over here. We've already talked about Chris on the left side of your screen. The other guy here on the right is Blake Rasmussen, who I know him from his function at Wizards as being the dude that passes out preview cards. Speaking of which, haven't gotten a preview card in a few sets. Blake, what up, man? Hit me up. What did I do? I want a preview card. But anyway, Blake's mostly going to be asking the questions if you haven't seen this stream yet, and Chris is going to be answering them. So the first question that we'll get into here, after, again, brief introductions and asking the philosophical question, what is the economy, which I don't think really much of interest is said in that exchange. Blake is about to ask maybe the first real question of note so far, just about 4 minutes in. So let's start.
When we built Arena and built it from the ground up a few years back, when the economy was built, What was it structured around? What was the focus? What was the goal?
So the original goal of Arena, again, was really about current Magic, right? Front list, what we call front list, which is, current releases, standard play. And in that, what we really wanted to focus on is if you are coming to Arena, how do you build a deck and get to a couple decks and get to what you want to play sooner rather than later. And so the primary economy is built around this idea of building and iterating on a deck or a few decks at a time, slowly over the course of using the in-game systems, whether it's the weekly quests or the daily wins or purchasing packs, whatever it is. You can kind of take your own pace to build the deck. If you want to accelerate it, obviously you can spend a little bit more up front. But if you don't want to spend, you can earn everything in-game just by playing over time. And again, that was in the service of somebody who was like, oh, I'm going to have decks to play with out of the gate. We provide a bunch of starter decks that we expect to be kind of the building blocks. Iterating on some of those or taking that as the core and then adding to it and finding your favorite deck that's out in the wild in standard or in the meta.
Now, has anybody tried playing in this style where you take one of the starter decks, for instance, and then with a brand new account, slowly iterate on that deck over time? Now, to in the service again of being as objective as possible here, Chris did make very sure to say a deck or a few decks. So I've seen some people characterize this as you can't just, it's not really realistic to take one deck and slowly iterate on it every time while you're getting crushed every day, every match by decks that are already like established meta decks with a billion rares and mythics in them and stuff like that. That's hard. That's hard even if you get to do it with a few decks at the very start of a fresh file. It just seems like it would be disheartening to go out there with the starter decks and probably consistently lose games, especially without much of a system in place for getting rewards even when you lose. And we will talk about that a little bit later on in the VOD. But for the time being, I will say that the idea of the basic experience, like not just the basic experience, but again, what the entire economy is based around. The idea of taking one deck that's kind of really underpowered and then iterating on it slowly is potentially possible, but it's a very feels bad way to not only play the game in general, but be introduced to the game. So is that a good way to like build your economy? Is that a good ideology to build, a good play ideology to build your economy around? I would say probably not. I would say that's probably flawed from the get-go. Now, in this next bit, Chris is going to more or less immediately move on as a response to the same question, with no prompt from Blake here, to talk about a couple of things that are going to come up a few times over the course of the stream. One being, okay, where does that leave players that want to collect full sets and play a lot of decks? And, again, weirdly, no prompt from Blake here. What about dusting? Again, something that'll come up a couple of times.
One of the things that when we look at if that's the target, kind of where are some of the areas where we maybe knowingly didn't target.
That's an interesting phrase. An area we knowingly didn't target.
And, those kinds of areas are things like I am a person who wants to collect a full set. This economy doesn't support that particularly well. We know right, and the wildcard system is built to effectively be that dusting system, but rather than tying it to destroying cards and destroying your collection, we tie it to something that's inherently part of Magic and inherently supposed to be fun, which is opening boosters.
Now, a lot has been said about this particular part of the stream, most of it pretty sardonic, and in some cases even like really bad-natured. Now, the basic takeaway from all of the dusting conversation here, if you just want like the TLDR spoiler alert, they're not going to do dusting. It's just not something it sounds like they'll really consider doing. And in fact, reading a little bit deeper into it, I mean, this is surface level. He literally just said it. They view the wildcard system as a replacement for dusting. Now, a little bit below the surface level there, I think is the implication that if we were to ever get a dusting system, they would take away the wildcard system. And I'd say, por qué no los dos? The answer to that, why can't we have both, is probably because it cuts into the bottom line.
If you're trying to build your collection, limited is a really good way to do that, because as part of the game experience, you're opening a bunch of cards and building your collection. You're also playing and earning prizes. If you don't like limited, you don't have that option to you.
Now, this isn't the last time in this conversation that you will hear, if you were playing limited, maybe it'd be a little easier to get some cards. Hey, I'm just saying, you play some limited, maybe you wouldn't gripe so much. You know what I mean? If you just played some limited, that'd be good. Here's the thing. Limited costs money, a lot of money, actually. A good little bit of money in US dollars and beyond, whatever kind of currency you're spending. Limited can get pretty expensive quickly, so I don't really see how that addresses any issues in the economy. It seems like, maybe we're going to need Rocky for this, but it seems as though one of the answers for, hey, this economy is too predatory is, why don't you just spend more money, you clowns?
So one of the things that we're going to be introducing here shortly, and I believe I don't have the exact timeline, but it's, around SNC, maybe sooner, is we're going to sell a pack that is Mythic guaranteed.
Okay.
So when you buy this pack, it'll cost 1,300 gold.
Okay.
There will be a gem bundle that you can get like 10 of them for gems instead. But the baseline is 1,300 gold. When you open that, the rare or mythic slot will be either a wild card, a rare or mythic wild card, or it will be a mythic from that set.
Okay.
And we're going to start that with Neo, and then we'll see how that goes. And if it's something that people are super interested in and is working the way we hope it works, then we'll continue to have those as part of the set offering moving forward.
Okay.
This, I actually think, is kind of an interesting idea. I have gotten to the point with a few sets now where you get all the rares from the set, and then packs from the set kind of feel useless because you're going to get the duplicate protection gems, which is something else we need to talk about. 20 gems for duplicate protection it's no gems. It's basically nothing. Although it is something, I'll give you that. It is something. It's not literally nothing, but it sure does feel like not a whole lot. 20 gems. But in any case, I have gotten to the point where I have a bunch of, I literally have 4 of every rare in a set. This is not a common problem, I imagine. But what he said about, when it really comes to completion of a set, eventually, after opening so many packs, you'll have all the rares, the mythics become an issue. And that is true. That is 100% true, from my experience at least. So I like the idea of a mythic pack. I'm not sure if 1,300 gold is the right call for that. And I also noticed that he slipped in there that in the rare mythic slot, you might get a rare wild card. I better not buy no mythic pack and get a rare wild card. Again, this seems like one of those situations where they're like, oh, you got problems with the economy? Spend more money, you bunch of rubes, you marks. So this is their solution here is that they're giving us something that costs more to fix a problem. And that on a surface level sucks. It's a sucky thing, but at least it's an option that didn't exist before that I think some players will be into. And I am, again, quite interested in this idea. I think you should also be able to buy them with gems. Possibly even real money, although who knows. But one way or the other, I do, in a way, if they were going to have you spend any resource on this, I'm glad that it's coins, right? Rather than the 1,000 gold for a pack, it's 1,300. And that's not too much higher. It's 30% higher, But again, almost guaranteed mythic. I really wish it were guaranteed mythic. I really wish it were. But one way or the other, I think that it's a good idea, maybe with some tweaks, but one way or the other, I'm not as down on this idea as I've seen some people in the community be. But I will acknowledge that this is just, hey, you got economy issues? Why don't you spend more? Wouldn't that be how to fit? We're Wizards of the Coast. We figured out capitalism.
So we're going to offer a wild card bundle that you can just buy in the store.
Okay, so direct purchase.
Direct purchase. It'll be 12 rare wild cards and 4 mythic rare wild cards. The theory is that, again, if you're pretty good along the way to having a deck that you like that's, you think is going to be pretty good, you just want to just finish it off right there, you can buy this from the store. It's $49.99 gives you everything you need to just kind of finish your deck. Or if you wanted to kickstart a deck, you'll be able to do that right out of the gate, and not have the.
Can you buy that for gems? Is it just?
It is going to be RMT only, so real money only.
Okay.
He is UD, so there's more to this statement, but that's all for now. Not for the stream or anything. Just I want to minimize this for a moment and do a little exercise real quickly. Oh no, it's got to make changes to my device. It's horrible. All right, so we're in Arena now, so we can do a little experiment and see how much we can get for $50. Let's check out packs. Let's do that, or let's check out first gems. So if we spend $49.99 in gems, same price that he just quoted there, we get 9,200 gems. How many packs does 9,200 gems buy us? Well, the 45 pack bundle is 9,000 gems, so we actually get some gems left over in that case. Also, we can buy it with gems and not only real money. So there's also that. The only real money thing is just unconscionable. That's ridiculous to me, but maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, 45 packs for 9,000 gems, or $49.95 plus some gems. Or $49.99 rather. $50. So, if you spend $50, you'll get 12 rare wild cards, 4 mythics. Right? If you open these 45 packs, you'll get something like 6 rare wild cards and 1 mythic. So, hey, $50, it sounds better, right? You know, I get double the rare wild cards, quadruple the mythics. Yeah, you also get 45 rares or mythics from these packs, making it, plus all the commons and uncommons, vault progress, which is a big deal. I think it's a big deal, at least. So, it would seem to me as though buying 45 packs is a much better deal most of the time. Again, considering the big selling point here, the 45 rares or mythics that you're going to open in those packs if you're trying to build decks. To me, it seems like the $49.99 price point is in some ways designed to fail. Chris goes on a little bit later in this VOD, not much later actually, to say that it's kind of a convenience thing. You get more rares, you get more mythics this way, just spending the $50. And you kind of don't have to go through like the tedium of opening all those packs, and it doesn't take so long and blah, blah, blah. So again, it's kind of a convenience bonus. Because you don't have to open all those packs, even though he also spends a great amount of time talking about how one of the core and most fun experiences in Magic is opening packs. But hey, if you don't want that experience, because it's so tedious, in fact, you can just spend $50 and we'll just throw you some wild cards. But you do have to spend $50 that you earned at your job or your birthday money or whatever. So again, it seems designed to fail. Chris also says a little bit later on here that this is only going to last for, I think it's 6 weeks or something like that. And then they're going to take it down, readjust. So my idea is that they will take this out of the store for a couple of weeks, bring it back at a lower price point, and be like, see, we listen to you. Ah, right? We are heroes. Are we not the best game company in the world? We listen to our people. This seems like the price tag should be literally half of what it is for it to be decent. Not only that, but one more time, you should be able to buy this not only with gems, but also with gold if you have enough. I think it's absolutely ludicrous that this is real money only. That's a horrible mistake and kind of nakedly greedy in some ways too, if you don't mind me saying.
The reason we don't do dusting is, again, it was a decision we made early on where what we wanted to prevent is the looking through your collection, trying to decide what you want to destroy. And for some, I don't want to, like, for some people that's going to be an easy decision. They know exactly what they want and they'll be able to destroy something. But for a lot of our players, that's actually a hard decision. It's going to be going to Reddit and like, here's my collection. What should I destroy?
Yeah.
Right. What is the best thing? How do I make sure I don't make a mistake?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I have to include this part because this is one of those parts that kind of gets me raging just a little bit low key, to be, you can't tell, but I don't like this. And you could even see he started saying, and I don't wanna, and he stopped himself because this sounds a little bit like insulting the intelligence of certain players. And, he goes on to say, well, they have to go on Reddit and say, what do I dust and what do I keep and all that and stuff. And it's like, well, that sounds like a fun exercise. Why not? That doesn't sound too painful. Why not let people do that or whatever? I just don't see how that is a barrier to dusting. I think most players are going to know what they want to dust, what they don't want to dust, what decks they do want to build, what decks they don't want to build at any given time, right? And, I mean, if I were to, say, dust a card that I ended up needing 2 months later, I did that. I can live with my own decisions because I made them. So, again, it just seems a little, I'm not coming for Chris here. I'm really not. I don't want to shoot the messenger. But that does seem like a somewhat patronizing answer because I think the majority of the player base, if most of the players, would know exactly what they did and did not want to dust and understand how that system worked and the consequences of it and all that stuff. So, again, I'm not as mad at this statement as I was the first time that I saw this. If you had gotten the dev that saw this video the first time he saw this video, this would be probably a more entertaining video in some ways, but also a less subjective one. So, again, a less even-toned one at least. So, again, I don't want to come for Chris here, but that was probably not the way to answer that question.
So one of the things we're doing here soon, probably April, May timeframe, is we're going to update some of the constructed events to be more similar to what we do with draft. You'll get gems, you'll get boosters as part of doing well.
Okay.
We'll have slightly different structures for best of 1 and best of 3. But the hope there is that by changing what the rewards look like and how you're playing, you're going to have more meaningful progress for collection for opting into a constructed event than you might currently have.
Now, this is just a good thing. This is just good, I would imagine. I would say that you could make the argument, if you were trying to be really cynical, that it's not enough. There is more. I mean, you've got this plus the wild card bundle, which isn't good. You've got the mythic pack, which you may not think is good, but could be good. I'm not saying that all these solutions work, but at the very least, I think this is something that doesn't take away anything from the experience, and in fact will add something. And a lot of people really like these standard events, various standard events, but they really don't reward you enough some of the time. I will say that there are standard events that allow you to net gold after you enter them, quite a few in fact, and those are very good. So if you incentivize standard events even more than we have now, sort of, I think that's, again, nothing but positive news. And in some ways, this is, again, even though you might say that it doesn't count for much, and it's kind of just a tiny little bump in the positive direction at the end of things, that it is still pretty much only positive that they're doing that. So, good.
Is there anything in the pipe to bring an eternal format that isn't tied to alchemy?
There is.
Okay.
And it's coming relatively soon.
Yeah.
We don't have the name or the exact definition, but you've seen some previews if you've been playing. We've run a couple different events. We'll look at the data and make sure we're picking the right one. But we will have here in the next month or two a non-rotating format that you can play with tabletop print cards.
Yep.
No digital only cards, no digital rebalances. It will just be printed or not printed. That will be coming very soon.
All right.
Now, this is actually, to me, one of my, if not my favorite part of these announcements today. They listened. This is something that I feel like is probably pretty easy for them to implement, and a lot of people have been asking them for exactly this, myself included. So he goes on to say that there's no name for it. They haven't figured out the exact system, but it is coming very soon, which is interesting that it's going to be here in a month or two, but they haven't done some of the, at least the branding for it yet, which is a little surprising. And they seem not to exactly know how they want the format to look, but they do know they want it out in 2 months. So that's kind of a bit of a red flag in some ways, but just on its face, the idea of a non-rotating format that has no digital-only cards that you can play in paper, I think is kind of a slam dunk from my perspective. So again, it's one of my favorite parts of the announcement. I'm kind of jacked for this, and I can't wait to see what it is.
I believe we have announced, and if we haven't, I'm going to preview it now.
Okay.
The ability to like set your favorite land, and
We haven't announced that, so continue.
Great. So that's coming. And some of the tech that was required to do that, to kind of clean up some, maybe some assumptions that were made a while ago, and like, oh, we're going to have this issue, or we're going to we don't want you to have to sort through, scroll through every land. Just set a favorite, and that'll be your default. That tech also will help us solve this other problem.
Okay.
So what this sounds like to me, and by the way, I could swear they had announced this already. This, we're announcing that you can set your favorite land, or that we intend to allow you to set your favorite land and stuff like that. I could swear this had been announced before. But anyway, what I think he means here by that same technology will allow us to solve this problem is not necessarily that they auto-dust the 15,000th copy of Duress that you've gotten. Duress was a great example. Really, it's just that you won't have to see them while deck building. That appears to be what he's talking about when it comes to setting a favorite land, and you won't have to go through all of the basic lands every time, or you won't have to, let's say I start a blue deck and it adds islands to my deck, it will automatically add my favorited land. And I think that, first of all, is a really cool thing. That's a thing that I wanted. Quality of life improvements are awesome, but it sounds like how that would be implemented in both, in deck creation, let me just say. Basically, I won't have to see the 8 different copies of Duress from different printings that I have, which is not necessarily solving the problem. The question was about auto-dusting these, however X or Y many copies of a card, even with the same artwork that you might have. And that's not, I don't think, what this answer is. I think this answer is, we're working on technology that would hide all of your extra copies of Duress. And isn't that the same thing? No, it's not.
Okay, no dusting. But what about converting common and uncommon wild cards for a rare mythic? So not dusting, but trading up. I know a lot of people end up with a lot of common, a lot of uncommon wild cards. That is the question, yeah.
So, the lot of common and uncommon wild cards is part of how we design the economy.
Okay.
Again, when we talk about regrets and feel bads, one of the things we wanted to prevent is anybody ever being unable to create a deck that they wanted because they didn't have uncommons. So we over-index on common and uncommon wild cards in the distribution of wild cards.
Okay.
Which is why we haven't even talked about that as a possibility.
Okay.
If we were going to do that, we would have to change a big chunk of how we distribute things.
Okay.
Now, there's a lot, I think, to unpack in this, but I'm going to try to do it as concisely as I possibly can. Again, just the end part there, if we were going to do that, we would have to change the way we distribute things. Again, that's because a lot of my takeaway from this is that Wizards doesn't want to adjust their economy in any way that they perceive would lead to them losing money, despite the fact that they're making money hand over fist. They're making most of the money that Hasbro is making right now. Look that up. It's true. They have smashed quarterly and yearly records the last couple of years for Wizards of the Coast, profits. So they are doing extremely well. And they could take a hit, but that's not really how capitalism works, right? I mean, businesses feel like they have to make more money, not only year over year, but quarter over quarter. So they're not going to do anything that makes the economy, for lack of a better way of putting this, less predatory, right? If they were going to do something like this, then he's basically said we would have to adjust the economy in other ways, so it would still be just as predatory as it is right now. And that is not something that gives me a lot of hope. I also kind of think we designed it so that you'd have lots of commons and uncommons because we want you to be able to have uncommons for deck building. We didn't want anyone to not have uncommons, but it's totally cool if you don't have the rares or the mythics to build a deck, right? And look, I totally understand. You have to put in more resources, whether it's gold or gems or money or whatever. You have to put in more resources to get rarer cards. Totally understandable. But again, there's not a whole lot of like standard decks that have high win rates that are made just with commons and uncommons. You can build an artisan deck for standard. It's something I actually think I'm pretty good at, to be honest with you. But it's not something that is super easy, especially for the average player. And even if you're a very experienced deck builder, if you try to build a peasant deck or a pauper deck and bring it into a standard event or a ranked standard, it ain't going to go well for you. So yeah, they made it very easy to build decks with lots of commons and uncommons. But for most people, it's not going to be the most pleasant play experience after you build those decks. So again, it's much harder to get rares and mythics than uncommons and commons. And they don't seem to care too much that there's a fairly high barrier to entry when it comes to those rarities that doesn't exist with commons and uncommons. There sure are an overabundance of commons and uncommons, almost no matter what level of player you are in the arena. And the idea of the question itself was, can we trade up in rarities? And the ultimate answer was, it's not something we're talking about right now, which is something that I want you to get used to hearing in the Q&A portion of this video. There's a lot of stuff they're not talking about right now that they have nonetheless heard a million times. I guarantee this question about trading up wild cards for wild cards of better rarities or whatever has been posed to them literally billions of times at this point. And it's not something they're thinking about, so it's not something that will ever happen. And it's something that I and many players would like some consideration for. Even if I have to spend 100 uncommon wildcards for one rare wildcard, I'd consider doing that. Why not give us the chance to do that? I don't understand it. I never will. It's something most of the player base wants. It's just a way to transmute. It's basically what it is, right? To transmute wildcard rarity higher up. And we're willing to pay whatever amount of wildcards it takes to do that. So I don't actually think they'd have to redistribute much of how the economy works. I just think they're afraid that if they did that, they would make less money. When again, the amount of goodwill that something like that would generate, the amount of stress it takes off of the player base, probably leads to a higher retention rate in the player base, and that is more money if I'm counting correctly. So all I'm saying is that there are ways that you could do this without it affecting the bottom line. You could make the economy less predatory without it affecting the bottom line, but that sure seems to be, get Rocky Maivia over here ready, but that seems to be the issue, the core issue with a lot of these questions. We can't do this thing because we'd make less money, and he never actually says that. But it sure seems to be, when you say things like, well, we'd have to redistribute the way everything else works, it sure sounds like you're saying, well, then we wouldn't make as much money, you doof.
All right, what about reimbursements for nerfed cards, so cards that are rebalanced to be less powerful in Historic? Can we get our wild cards back? Before you launch into that, I'm gonna be corporate chill for a sec. It is worth pointing out that there were a bunch of nerfed cards, rebalanced cards, and it was alchemy, so a little different, but that did show up in the event, the championship this past weekend. So they do still get played.
When we're talking about Historic specifically, we're also talking about what's the long-term plan. If I'm balancing something for a rotating format,
Yep.
what happens when those cards rotate?
Yeah.
Do they just go back to normal? It's very likely that that's kind of something we will pursue. We haven't gotten to that point yet, so
Sure.
we don't know for sure.
Yep.
But that is on our mind too. Is like, it's very easy for us to be like, oh, it is rotated out. It's a historic only card. Great, full power.
Okay, so a couple of interesting things in this response. First of all, this is one of the few times that Blake interjects with something in this whole thing, and he says something that's not entirely non sequitur to me, but still I think has some issues, where he says, oh, well, some of the cards that were nerfed that you want those wild cards back for were in the set championship. They showed up even though we nerfed them, so people are still playing them. And honestly, that's not the point. The point is that I spent a wild card, which are difficult to get. They're worth $50. I spent wild cards on a card that I liked. I liked the text that was printed on the card. I liked what the card did when you printed it. That's why I spent the wild card on it. It's not about, it's really not about whether the card still sees play in a deck. It's that the card doesn't do the thing that made me fall in love with the card. It doesn't do the thing that made me invest in spending the wild card on it in the first place. Now, I can tell you, I probably could have saved you a lot of time with this answer because Chris's answer is probably just going to be like, you're not getting your wild cards back. All things considered, that's going to be the end result of the answer. But there's some interesting things said here. I like the idea that we can maybe revert, in historic at least, we can revert a card back to its original printing once it's rotated out of alchemy. And I think that's kind of a really cool idea if they do that. Now, I didn't guarantee they'll do that, but he said it's very likely something they'll pursue. So if they do that, probably great, but it does kind of suck to have to wait like 2 years for a card to, get unnerved, especially when you invested in it early in a standard environment.
Why do Brawl and Historic Brawl not have a ranking?
So, mostly from, again, when we talk about intent of what some of those formats are for. We look at Brawl and Historic Brawl as additional formats for fun, for variation, and less competitive. So we don't want competitive pressure on formats where we hope that the primary goal is fun.
Okay.
What do you think Unranked is for? Right, and if you had a ranked brawl queue and an unranked brawl queue, then maybe all the people, because they are about to acknowledge this, I've paused it a little prematurely here, they're about to acknowledge that there are players in the brawl queue, both historic and standard brawl, that are going to play extremely overpowered decks that would be top tier decks in a competitive version of these formats. And in the normal unranked play queue modes for these brawl formats, you're going to meet these people. So if those people had a ranked brawl format in which to play, maybe, just perhaps, the fun, stress-free play experience that you want to cultivate, that you want Brawl to bring the player base, would actually exist in unranked Brawl. Maybe that's why unranked modes exist. It seems silly to me that they're just arbitrarily like, nope, it's a fun format. That's all it is. That's all it's ever going to be. You can't play that competitively. So then you go to the unranked play queue in Brawl and get stomped by competitive Brawl players. Is how that works out.
Why don't you include Pac Codes in physical packs?
Why don't we do that?
Yeah, so like we do include some codes in packs.
We do
but
some.
they're-
We do.
yeah.
So
You get them in pre-release
primarily
packs.
we do. So primarily, one of the things we like to do is we like to reward experiences.
Yep.
A lot of the times over, just raw product.
Yeah.
So when you do pre-release,
I was gonna say I opened a pre-release pack today, and yeah.
those have codes because we have this experience, and then you go do the thing, and then you're going to experience other things. The problem with just bulk packs is that the tabletop audience is much larger than the arena audience, and so a lot of people who get those just they're not useful to them.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of silliness in this answer, and it's one of the last questions that they'll answer on the stream, but boy, there's a lot of weird stuff in this answer. Just the implication that, like, paper players don't play Arena is weird to me. I mean, not all paper players play Arena, obviously, but the idea that they won't have anything to do with that code is, like, weird, because I can't do anything with a marketing card. Most of the time I don't do anything with a token. It seems like an arena code would be many more times, many times more useful than something like that. And just because not everyone that plays paper plays arena, so that's honestly good news for you, right? That's a bunch of codes that aren't being used on free arena stuff. And you could also, the easy counterpoint to this is the idea that maybe some of those paper players that don't play Arena would be more likely to play Arena if you gave them like a single pack of cards in, one pack of Arena cards in every, physical $4 pack of cards that they buy. Just a lot of weirdness in this particular answer. I find it weird too that he says, we like to do things that reward experiences, and that's why you get them in pre-release packs, right? Because a pre-release is an experience. And this is coming from someone who has done a great deal of legwork in this whole stream talking about the experience of opening Magic packs. How that is, in and of itself, one of the fundamental experiences, which I believe he even uses the word experiences, in Magic the Gathering. How they devoted a lot of the economy not to dusting or anything like that, but replacing dusting with opening packs, because opening packs is a fun and exciting and fundamental experience to the core of being a Magic player. But now we get to this question, and opening packs is no longer an experience. I find that interesting. But for the most part, that is the end of this stream, and there was a lot to unpack in this thing. Again, I like to sleep on things, give myself 24 to 48 hours so I can make the most objective, even-handed analysis that I can bring to you. And even under these circumstances where I waited 3 days, watched the thing 4 or 5 times before I actually gave you the analysis and formed my opinion, I'm still obviously upset and just kind of like weirded out by the way some of these questions were answered. This was not a great stream. There's a reason so many people in the community say this wasn't a great stream. It's because that is the truth. Now, in the aftermath of this, I have seen some people... Oh, wow, I can hear myself talk now. In the aftermath of this, I have seen some people say, the usual stuff. You don't have to buy a product if you don't want to buy it and all that. If you don't want to buy the Mythic packs, you don't have to buy it. If you don't want to buy the Wildcard bundle, you don't have to buy it. But I think that is an extremely reductive attitude that I've seen numerous people online that I normally respect their opinions very much that have this take. And that is... really, it lacks all nuance. It kills all nuance, in fact. It basically means that you can never, under any circumstances, criticize a product for being predatory or overpriced or whatever. And I think that is a really weird way to look at not only Magic the Gathering, but just like the world in general. Like, you really can't ever criticize a product for its price tag. That's a little weird, even if it's something you don't need. Like things like food or diapers or, things that people need. I think that you can get away with criticizing the price tag and not too many people really mind, except for like serious ANCAPs and stuff. But for the most part, I still think that it's possible to take a product like this that nobody needs. You don't need to buy. It's not food, shelter, water, or anything like that. You don't need to buy Magic the Gathering products. But I still think that it's possible to critique the price points as predatory. And the more critiquing that we do online, the more likely Wizards is to see that and adjust the price point in a direction that we like. So keep yelling and screaming about this, I think. Again, don't attack anybody directly. Attack the arguments. Don't attack the people. Always, always, always remember to spread love, be kind in all circumstances, and don't go around, calling people names or insulting people or, just making like the worst digs at these people. Again, attack the arguments and not the person, but I think there's plenty to attack in the arguments here, not only from these folks, but from people who tell you that you cannot criticize a product. Like, if you don't plan on buying it, don't buy it. It's not for you. Again, that's an extremely rigid and silly worldview, if you don't mind me saying. I think that you definitely have the freedom to criticize products, and when you do so, there's a higher chance that product will be price adjusted accordingly if you make a big enough stink, you see. So again, I just wanted to address that real quick, because I've seen a lot of people say, like, well, if you don't want it, you don't have to buy it. And like, yeah, that's true, but the idea that I can never criticize a product for its price point or its a company for its predatory practices or its greed in an online economy is very silly. That sounds like a Rubish, Markish attitude to me. But anyway, that's the entire stream. This is a 7-hour video, I'm sure, so I apologize for how long you had to dedicate to this video, especially if you've already seen this video that came out and I've now put you through that trauma once more. I apologize greatly. But in any case, let me know how you felt about the analysis down there in the comments section. If you like this style of video, I'd be more interested in doing it from time to time. Again, not much of a React streamer, but this is an interesting way to make a video that I haven't really done before. So let me know if you like it. And aside from that, do all the YouTube stuff. Like, share the video around so more people see the takes. Subscribe if you want more content, if you haven't done that. I know nobody subscribes on YouTube anymore, but if you haven't done it yet, go ahead and give me a try. I'm not going to let you down if you sub. Let's do that, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.